Hello YouTube, this is Hunter Surge, and today we are covering the fourth of our Buddyfight Cross Vanguard deck guides. Today we're going to be talking about Zanya, which is a personal favorite of mine. Let us get into it. So, Zanya is, like Ein, one of the top contenders in the format. In the Buddyfight final stage, Zanya took 2 slots of the top 8. And those placed first and third in Swiss at the end of Swiss. One of them finished in top 4, and then the other got knocked out in top 8. It's a very, very strong deck in the format, because it is able to exploit some similarities that all the decks have, though a couple of its tools are a bit weaker into the format. It is also a personal favorite of mine, as despite very much not liking the character Zanya, this is the deck that leans most into the defensive playstyle, caring a lot about your guarding stuff, that I always tend to trend towards. So I'm a very big fan of this deck, and I've labbed it out quite a bit. Talked a lot with one Mei Chengu a lot about this deck, because it is something I enjoy a lot. I think it's really, really good, and it's something you absolutely must be prepared for going into a buddy fight tournament, or you might just get rinsed by it. So baselines, as always. In buddy fight, you are not going to have energy, and you are not going to get a draw for going second. You are also going to immediately lose a soul from your flag going to the order zone. You will have a gauge resource where you get 2 gauge off the top of your deck immediately that you use to pay for your call costs and cast costs of your various units and order cards. Each turn, you're able to take a card from your hand, throw it into your gauge to draw a new card. This happens before you ride on turn 2 and 3. Turn 2 onwards, but on turn 1 it happens after you ride, because it happens the moment the crest comes into play, which is after you ride over the grade 1. This has the effect of discard fodder cards being extra important in buddy fight decks, because instead of the typical, okay, I need to discard 3 cards to build up to grade 3 to keep your gauge resources where you really want them to be, you're gonna typically need to be discarding effectively 5 to 6 cards in your write-up process. So good discard fodder is really, really important in the buddy fight nation. You will also put a rear guard into your ride line as a buddy card, that the moment you put out your flag will move to the order zone, and then once you hit grade 3 once per fight, you will be able to call it out from your order zone and countercharge one in the process. Alright, so baselines established, let's talk about Zanya. So Zanya first has the continuous effect to, during your opponent's turn, you can play 2 orders. This is a really big deal. As we've talked about in previous videos, all of the buddy fight decks get these Blitz Order Sentinels that have additional effects. The core issue with the Blitz Order Sentinel, of course, is that you can't use more than one in a turn. Even Tatsuya isn't able to use his Solomon's Shield twice in a single turn. But Zanya is allowed to use 2 copies of his in the same turn, which is quite nice. However, that's typically not what you're going to be doing. And then he also has the effect to act once per turn, counterblast 1, and grab a non-sentinel ninja arts and a non-sentinel ninja from your drop, put into your hand. So you always have access to some really good drop toolboxing, and that drop toolboxing is a lot more than it is on this surface, but we'll talk about that in a bit. And then his last effect, which is his spell ability, ability that is named after a spell that the deck used in Buddy Fight, is Clear Serenity. You Soul Blast 1, and you gauge 3 from your drop zone. This effect is so incredibly valuable because it uniquely positions Zanya to allow Zanya to run charge and draw significantly less than other decks in the format, because you can, once you hit grade 3, you can just convert your soul into 3 gauge. That doesn't get you closer to deck out. Which is very, very, very good. Because by the nature of charge and draw and having less offensive power overall, as well as Zanya's particular proclivity for defensive play, it's deck out is a pretty real concern in the Buddyfight decks. Okay, so moving on from there, how are we getting our multi-attack? Because Zanya is fortunately not stuck in the same pit as Gao. It is a 5-attack deck. So we have 2 methods of getting additional attacks. The first is Ghoul Deity Gojinmaru, which is a grade 2 that you pay gauge and put a Tsukikage and Byakuya from your rear into its Buddy Soul. When it attacks, if your Buddy Soul has any ninja cards, it gets power plus 5k until end of turn. This is, of course, a stacking effect. So it'll get plus 5k on its first swing, and then it has the double attack keyword, which will allow it to restand for Counterblast 1 at the end of its battle if your grade 3 or greater Vanguard is stand. So first swing, it's going to go up by 5, and then it's going to keep down the second swing, and then gain that power again on the second swing. It has Soul Guard with 2 soul, which means that your opponent just is not removing it. Once Gojinmaru is on the field, it's going to be staying there. And it also has the Shadow Dive ability. During the battle this unit attacked, your opponent cannot intercept. A innocuous ability most of the time, though quite good into stuff like Vergilla. But this is incredibly valuable in the Buddyfight-only format because 3 of the 6 decks use the drum engine. And one of the best parts of the drum engine is the fact that Thunder Knight's drum gets to intercept for 20k very consistently. So being able to just turn that off on your Shadow Dive swing, on your Gojinmaru swings, is very valuable. And guess what? The other multi-attacker in the deck also has Shadow Dive. Nano Machine Ninja Byakuya. It has the Shadow Dive Continuous. When your grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Zanya's card name attacks, you can discard a card from your hand to stand it. And when this attacks a grade 3 or greater unit, if you have a rearguard with Tsukikage or Gojinmaru in its card name, this unit gets power plus 5,000. So this is likewise a stacking effect. It is not going to be live until your opponent's on grade 3 themselves. But it is still, Byakuya is still going to be able to multi-attack when your opponent's on grade 2, which in certain scenarios might just be enough. That might just be all you. Now, there are some pretty heavy card advantage costs we're seeing here, right? Because Gojinmaru needs to suck up 2 of your rears to be called, and Byakuya needs you to discard to multi-attack. But that isn't a problem. So first up, let's talk about the Buddy, Nano Machine Ninja Tsukikage. When it's placed on rear, if you have not called a copy of this card this turn, you can pay a gauge and retire it to search your deck or drop. Very important for you to be able to pull from the drop later in the game so that you don't get yourself closer to deck out. You search your deck or drop for up to a total of 2 non-sentinel grade 2 or less ninja unit cards with card names different from this card, reveal them, and put them into your hand. And then it has another effect during your opponent's turn when this unit would leave rearguard. You may discard a card from your hand if you do leave this unit on rearguard. This is a reference to what it did in Buddyfight. You're never going to be leaving Tsukikage on the field to your opponent's turn. It's always going to be immediately retired for its effect. So that's one piece, right? That's an immediate just +1 for no counterblast cost, which is incredible. And then we have Nano Machine Ninja Tsukikage SD, that when it's placed on rear, you pay a gauge, choose up to 1 Nano Machine Ninja Byakuya SD from your drop, and call it to rear. So that will, so you can go, if you have a Byakuya SD already in drop, you can go Buddy Called Tsukikage, search for both of these, search for Tsukikage SD and Gojinmaru, call Tsukikage SD, call the Byakuya SD from your drop, and then turn them into Gojinmaru. So you get a 1-card Gojinmaru that way. Very, 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 very simple. It costs 3 gauge, but we have clear serenity. So it's fine. So other details here. Tsukikage SD can also, as an act, shove itself into the soul of any ninja rearguard that does not already have a copy of it in its soul. And that's relevant because of its continuous effect. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, your unit with this unit in its Buddy Soul gets power plus 5,000 and shield plus 5,000. The ability to shove this into are units that do not have Soul Guard, is a very important piece of this deck to get you to the power thresholds you really want to be hitting. Byakuya SD also has Shadow Dive, though it's not really going to come up. And then when it attacks or boosts, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, and you have a Tsukikage or Gojumaru rear guard, it gets power plus 5k. So this is a 13k booster, 18k with the Tsukikage SD in it, which is pretty nice. And then a couple more critical pieces to talk about. Ninja our Snake Gaze. This is responsible for a ton of the deck's power. You choose is a blitz. You choose a unit being attacked, and it gets power plus 15k. And then you can optionally discard a card from your hand, choose an attacking rearguard, and it gets continuous rearguard. This unit does not stand. So every single deck in the Buddyfight collab needs to use multi-attacks, needs to do rearguard restands to get its multi-attacks. Like it can give up one of their attacks and do 4 attacks with some of the decks, like Tetsuya and Kyoya and Tsuku all get one of their multi-attacks from one of their additional attacks from non-restand effects, but all of them also do have a restand effect. So this effect effectively becomes a 1-card perfect card, which is incredible because it's a Ninja Arts card, which means that you're going to be able to get it back from your drop with the effect of Zanya every single turn. It is not a Sentinel, so it is not limited by that restriction, and it makes this card incredibly powerful. One of the craziest cards they've printed into Standard. Really, really strong card. There's another Blitz order, which will sometimes see tech play. We see it in this top 4 list. That is, you choose a unit that's being attacked, give it plus 15k, and if your opponent's attacking unit is a Vanguard, you can draw a card. It's alright, but like in a lot of lists, you won't have the space for it. We have 4 copies of the normal order Futon Sweeping Whirlwind in this list. You will see it at 4 copies in most lists. It has 2 modes. You either use it as a normal order to add a ninja unit card without Sentinel from your drop to your hand. So that's really good toolboxing. Helps you get back to Tsukikage, for example, if you need to. And when it's discarded from hand by a card's ability, you gauge 1 from the top of your deck and draw a card. So those discard effects like Byakuya and Snake Gaze, and even your perfect cards are way, way better. Because you can discard this and ignore the cost. You lose 2 cards from your deck, so you do have to be careful about that when it comes to the deck out game. But it's still really, really good. Our Blitz order is, I'd say, definitely the strongest of the 3. Art of Body Replacement. Its additional effect is after you use it to perfect card, you then choose a ninja without Sentinel from your drop and add to your hand, and then remove this card from the game. Incredibly strong. Lets us just set ourselves up for next turn. Gives us a 5k shield to use if we really need it during this turn. Just incredible stuff. And we can discard Futon to this. And it's only a 1-card PG. Like, incredible stuff. More than that, by the way. More than that. There's like 1 or 2 more critical cards to talk about. We have Shiden. This is more of a tech card. You don't want to spam this effect, but it's when placed on rear, you can pay a gauge, discard Ninja Arts, draw 2. This can, of course, be a draw 3 for no gauge cost if you discard Futon. But you do have to be careful about your deck size. But the main reason that I find some copies of Shiden is important in Zanya lists is because you're shoving all of your every copy of Tsukikage SD you find into something's Buddy Soul. You can actually run out of boosters, so you appreciate having a couple more. Like if you, for example, because like one of the Byakuya SDs is going to be in the soul of Gojumaru most of the time. So let's say you damage one of your Byakuya SDs, just one. If you load all of your Tsukikage SDs in, you will not have enough Byakuya SDs available in your deck to fill out your back row. So having 1 or 2 copies of Shiden gives you a few more boosters in your deck that you can search out with Tsukikage, and put in that backline to ensure that you have a full backline. and that you're hitting the maximum power that you can reach. Because the biggest problem with this deck is that the power numbers aren't super impressive. You're often decently susceptible to like damage triggers, and it doesn't feel super great. Which is why you really need to be using the Tsukikage SD to spread your power around. And you really need like a full field. It's pretty important to have a full field. And that is also why we see in this list, the Regalis piece of choice is Gradius Gradal, which is something I very strongly agree with. Just having an extra copy of Persona Ride feels fairly important in this deck. Yeah. But unfortunately for our current understanding of the Buddyfight events at the BCSs this season, we will not be able to use Nationlist cards from other sets, so we won't be able to use a Regalis piece. We'll talk about that a bit later. And then the trigger lineup, you might notice this is less than 8 crit. This is 7 front. This is something that me and Chang found in our testing as well. That by the nature of how slow the deck tends to play, is actually just better to run fronts as your offensive triggers. Because you're not trying to kill your opponent super fast by flipping a bunch of crits. You instead would rather like get steady damage over time and then have more power when once you put your opponent in lethal range. Also important to note about this deck, this is the only 5-attack Buddy Fight deck that only requires 1 Counterblast for its 5-attack setup. It can require 2 Counterblast if you end up setting up 2 Gojenmaros, but if it's Byakuya plus Gojenmaru, which is more common, you will only require 1 Counterblast, which does give it an edge in the long game compared to all the other Buddy Fight decks. And then for the specific fronts, we're running damage control, of course, the 20k front, but we're also running Demon Wake Epikugiri. This is a fairly useful normal order with the effect of Counterblast 1, choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retire it. However, something I've been thinking about recently is that in the context of the Buddyfight-only event, retiring isn't that useful. So I think it might actually be better to run 3 copies of Buddy Charge instead, which is the Soul front, because getting more Soul means that we can resolve Zanya's effect, Clear Serenity effect more, which will enable us to have more gauge to play around with, which is very, very nice. What else is there to talk about? Ninja Arts Steel Ball is a decently useful normal order. We can get back with our effect. This can get back basically any of our this can get back this as is a Ninja Art, so it can get back a 15k shield if we're already set up, which is also pretty fantastic. And the normal order effect can be decently useful. It gives one of your ninja units plus 3k power for the turn, which, given our attackers are all grade 2s, that's actually exactly enough to make a stage difference when they're solo attacking, as they will be on one of their attacks. So that's actually pretty nice, not something to overlook. And then the ride line. So the grade 1 puts a Shinobi Scrolls order token into our order zone, and then the grade 2, when rode upon by the grade 3, looks at top 5 and adds a Ninja Arts or Ninja without Sentinel from among them to our hand. Shinobi Scrolls is a pretty strong card. That is a pay gauge, and you put a card from your hand into its Buddy Soul face down, and then once per your turn, you can play a non-Blitz order Ninja Arts from this card's Buddy Soul, or during your opponent's turn, once per turn, you can play a Ninja Arts Blitz order from its Buddy Soul. This makes, so the line we talked about before, where we Art of Body Replacement or Snake Gaze, discard Futon to make them only cost 1 card out of hand. Actually, they can cost 0, because we can just shove the Snake Gaze or Body Replacement into Shinobi Scrolls, draw a card so they've replaced themselves, and then play them from Shinobi Scrolls no hand cost. We broke even on that, and discard Futon, so that replaces itself as well. Very, very strong card advantage wise. It also has the ability to play a lethal formation from within itself. We'll talk about that real quick. Lethal formation does not feature in any of the lists I'm going to be showing you today. But it does do something pretty strong. So this is an impact order. You play at the end of your turn. If you have a Zanya Vanguard, great to regret a Zanya Vanguard, and you don't have a lethal formation, you pay 3 games to play it. Then when it's played into Order Zone, you search your deck or drop for up to 1 card, put it face down as this card's Buddy Soul, and if you search the deck, shuffle your deck. When your opponent's drive check would reveal a trigger card other than Heal and Over, if this card's face down Buddy Soul has the same trigger icon as that reveal card, you may turn it face up. If you do, nullify the power increase effect from your opponent's trigger effects and perform one of the following according to that trigger icon. If it's a critical, you give your opponent's Vanguard -1 critical. If it's draw, your opponent chooses a card from their hand and discards it. And if it's a front, all of your opponent's front row units get power -10k. So, I think a lot of people have misevaluated this card because what it does is actually very, very strong. So like the only time you're actually reversing the trigger is on a front, right? Because they still get the other effect. So they still draw, they would just have to discard after. It just becomes a filter instead. If it's a critical, they still get to give a critical to something. But they have to apply a -1 critical after. The front is the only one where the power gets canceled, and then their front row gets -10k. But that's actually not the mode we care about. The critical mode is what we care about. The critical mode is what we really care about. Because what the critical mode actually does is when you are at 4 or less damage, and your opponent is swinging with their Vanguard, you get to look at them and go, no guard, you need to flip 2 crits to kill me. Because if they flip 1 crit, then, okay, they don't get the power. If they apply it to Vanguard, they're still only hitting for 1 damage. And if they apply it to rear, their Vanguard hits for no damage. So it can give you a lot more security. The only reason that lethal formation is not worth playing is because it just costs too much gauge. 3 gauge at the end of our turn is just a bit too much, especially when you want to be slow roll or charge and draws a bit. So it's just a bit too expensive. But this effect is very strong. If we get another Buddy Fight sack, and say for example they give us a super lethal formation, which in Buddy Fight was a version of lethal formation that, in addition to do all the lethal formation things, also gave a power and defense buff to all of your ninjas. If for example they give us that, and it gives like a +5k buff to all your ninjas, or just all your front row ninjas, or whatever, that card would 100% be played just for that mode. But also having that critical denial mode, it would be extremely powerful. Like being able to just no guard your opponent's Vanguard swing when you're on 4 or less is incredibly powerful. Just having that security is so strong, and should not be underestimated at all. The other card that's not in this list is Hades Fall. So Hades Fall is a set order that you pay gauge to play. When it's put into Order Zone, you search your deck for up to 1 card, put into this card's Buddy Soul face down, and shuffle the deck. Order Zone, when your opponent's rear guard is placed during their main phase, you can discard a card from this card's Buddy Soul. If the grade of the card discarded for the cost is the same as the placed unit's grade, you retire that unit. So this is a very powerful effect that nothing really does what this does in the game. In main format, where Zanya has seen like a bit of rogue success, this is way more powerful. But in Buddyfight-only, because basically every deck has access to Soul Guard, it's significantly less powerful. So if you're using this card, what you want to specifically be doing with it is you want to be setting up grade 1s and using it to deny their boosters, to take a bit of power away from their board. That's pretty good into Kyoya. Into Jackknife, you can put in a grade 2 because original Jackknife does not have Soul Guard, so you can just pop it right away and make them spend more resources to get into their big Gold Ritter play. And you can put this down early, which is very nice. What else is available to it? Can also, like, even if you don't stop them from getting out the initial jack, you can also just do it when they put up the last thing, the last jack, any of the jack pieces, because that will then require them to get an additional Buddy Soul into jack before they can go into Gold Ritter, which can screw them up. And into Gao, Drum the Future does not have Soul Guard, so you can deny that. But the big reason to play Hades Fall in Buddyfight-only format is the fact that second Omni Demon Lord Asmodai is key to the offenses of the Tetsuya deck. And it has an effect that when it leaves the rear guard, you put the top card of your deck into your damage zone. Very, very bad. But typically, this won't happen because it has an effect to discard a card anytime it would leave rear guard to instead stay on rear. However, that effect is only active during the opponent's turn. And Hades Fall triggers during their turn when they call the second Omni Demon Lord Asmodai. So you can just Hades Fall, by putting a grade 3 into this matchup, can just completely hose the deck. Just get a free damage, which is incredible, and then you force them to find their way to second Omni Demon Lord Asmodai again, and you could have potentially set up multiple copies of Hades Fall. Now, the biggest problem with using Hades Fall in this way is that it requires a grade 3, and you may notice the only grade 3s in the deck are the Regalis piece, which as far as we understand, cannot be used in the BCS Buddyfight-only tournaments, and our Persona Rides, which are kind of important. So it is kind of risky, it is kind of scary to go for, but the payoff for it is so incredibly high that it's probably ultimately worth it. Even setting up the multiple Hades Fall is okay, this will probably just stop them from getting their full 5 attacks and getting their biggest attacker out on their initial on their ride up turn, and you'll get 2 damage out of it as well. And that free damage is probably going to make up for not having the Persona Rides. So yeah. That is the basics of everything that Zanya has to offer. There's a lot here. There's a lot of really important stuff. So we'll talk about the differences in this real quick. So this top 4 list, there's 2 primary things you can do with the Buddy in Zanya, and it does actually change the list quite significantly. Your options are buddying Gojin Maru or buddying Tsukikage. Buddying Tsukikage means so this still ran Tsukikage in main, but I actually would not do this. I would not recommend doing that because the value of buddying Tsukikage is you're already taking away a copy that you could be running in main deck. So you're basically giving up on max consistency of Tsukikage for a good early game push. So in my opinion, it is better to if you're buddying Tsukikage, what that gives you is you get to run no Tsukikage in main because you have infinite access to this card. So you just run the one in buddy zone, and then that saves you slots in your main deck. The other option is buddy Gojin Maru, and that lets you run 0 or 1 Gojin Maru in your main. You will always have access to the Gojin Maru, and then you get to run 4 Tsukikage in main, which is pretty strong because Tsukikage turns into 2 to 3 bodies on its own turn 2. So it represents a very strong single card early game push. Very, very good stuff. Those are the 2 options. Under our current understanding of the BCS Buddyfight-only rule set, I would personally recommend the Gojin Maru Buddy build because we are not allowed to use, our understanding is we are not allowed to use nationless cards from outside of the Buddy Fight booster, which means the only overtrigger we are allowed to use is Future Card Buddy Fight, and its additional effect is you choose a normal order from your draw, put into hand, choose one of your Vanguards, it gets critical +1, and then you choose one of your Buddy monsters on rear guard, and it gets critical +1. And this is the big reason that you would want to run the Gojin Maru build over the Tsukikage build for the BCS events, because Tsukikage is never going to be on our field during the battle phase. Never. But Gojin Maru is always going to be there. So to make profitable use of this order, it is ultimately probably best to be running the Gojin Maru Buddy build, which does have its own advantages. It's fine. It's just the deck space saving thing is pretty nice. All right. So then there's the top 8 list. This was doing the Buddy Kojimaru thing. Its trigger lineup is a bit weird. It was only running 2 heals. But that appears to be like I would estimate that was because of Ein, because Ein is always going to put you in a situation where your heals aren't going to resolve. I'm not sure I'd go that route, but you know, and this is on the 4 Tsukikage, of course, 0 Gojimaru in main, because they are buddying the Gojimaru. I would not go to draws for this. Actually, oh, I forgot. Oh, I actually completely forgot. Oh, this is just teched out for Ein. That's what this is doing. I completely forgot there was actually a way in in the previous video I talked about how in other formats Ozzy Dahaka faces a problem of alternate removal prevents you from getting the Occulta Guanef equip. And I thought there was no way to pull this off in Zanya. In the Buddyfight-only format. If Zanya had access to a grade 4 that it could use, it could put that under Hades Fall and do it that way, but that's not the reality. However, I forgot that the Katana World draw trigger, its normal order effect is bouncing a rear guard. And if you bounce Ozzy Dahaka, they don't get a Quota Guanef. They just don't get it. Okay, that's actually something to consider. Yeah, that's actually something to consider. Because that's a very powerful tech. That's a very powerful tech. It is a Ninja Arts too. So you can get it off the top 5. You can salvage it with Zanya. I don't think I would go in on this. Yeah, I don't think I would go in on this, but something you could, so like I'm mathing this out in real time. I hope you realize, but pretty sure this works. The trigger condition for Hades Fall is you just it's just your opponent placing a rear guard, and then you discard the card as cost. So what I'm thinking is, I wouldn't go 3 copies like this build does, but I would consider 1 copy of Minu Wagagushi, so that you can then put it into Hades Fall in the early game. As soon as your opponent calls a rear, you trigger Hades Fall, knowing it won't get a retire, but putting Minu Wagakushi in your drop. And from there, you can then, once you hit grade 3, return it to hand with the effect of Zanya, and bounce their Ozzy Dahaka. That is a tech worth doing. We have access to Foolish Burial in this deck, so we have like pretty consistent access to that. Wow, that's really strong. That's actually, I completely blanked on that by being a possibility. That's really good. Yeah, I wouldn't go full in 3 of these because I think that ruins your trigger lineup too much. But that line in against Ozzy is very powerful. That's very powerful, and the fact that we can just dump it with Hades Fall and then get back with Zanya's effect is super strong. That means we don't have to actually ruin our trigger lineup too much to have access to this line, which is super, super good. Yeah, other than that, there's not much complicated going on here. My personal lists, this is my personal Gojimaru list. I only run 1 sheet in here. I would probably go up to a 2nd sheet or a 3rd Byakuya for dropping the Gradius Gradel. As I was talking about earlier, I haven't actually switched over to the buddy charges, but and talking about that tech I was just discussing, I would probably go like, I would change the trigger lineup to 4 damage control, 2 buddy charge, and 1 Minu Wagakushi. And And then over here, also for over trigger, I strongly, I didn't put in my last card here. What is missing here? Byakuya. They're Byakuya there. Okay. Yeah, this is the Tsukikage list. Very similar. I strongly prefer having 4 hit Snake Gaze because the card is so powerful in general, and just in this format as well. That you just always want to see it. And if you're able to use Zanya's retrieval effect to toolbox, or just don't have to use it and can save the Counterblast, that's very good. That's very good. Yeah. So that's Zanya. Let us talk about the play patterns real quick. All right. So let's talk about some formations. So grade 1, there is some stuff we can do. Let's return this to the deck real quick. And let's talk about some stuff we can do grade 1 if we're going second. So the deck has access to 3 pretty good grade 1s. And we have a pretty good tri-lane option. The obvious thing is we go, at some point we discard Byakuya SD. We could gauge that as well. Could also be in our initial 2 gauge. And we go from there, we go call Tsukikage SD from our hand. If it was in our gauge, we would actually be able to pay it out and then call it from drop, which is pretty good. But we can just go this, and we just have a very easy tri-lane here. If we open Shiden's good for tri-laning as well. Some other things to be aware of course, is we can use Shinobi Scrolls for some additional filtering if we need to try and find a specific card. Where is it? Hades Fall, in the matchups where it's useful, is a grade 1. So we can put that down, and like set up a grade 3 for fighting Asmodai, set up a grade 2 for Jack, stuff like that. That can also really help beat back our opponent's early aggression. So we might put in a grade 1. Would it be a grade 1? No, we can't stop Asmodai effect, right? Yeah, we can't stop Asmodai effect. Depending on the matchup, we can like line something up to beat back our opponent's early game, like grade 2 stop the Dance Asmodai from sticking around. Same for versus Jack, for if they go into a base Jack or whatever. So that stuff is pretty nice to have access to. Good to keep in mind. Futon is also live early, but it's not likely to be used for anything early. However, as a 4-up, we are fairly likely to see it, so it might be one of those cards we shove into Shinobi Scrolls early if we have the gauge to work with. And this is a fairly easy tri-lane. Like, Shin also contributes here. Like, good stuff, good stuff. Alright, moving on from that, we of course have the grade 2 line. We're doing this with the build that that has the Buddy Tsukikage and none in main. So we'll just pull that out from Buddy Zone. Not actually a Buddy Call, but this line, again, does not require any Counterblast out of us. So we go, so like, ideally, we want Byakuya SD in drop already for this. We go Tsukikage, paying a gauge in the process, to search for, we would search for Tsukikage SD, and we would search for, where is it? Base Byakuya. And if our opponent's on grade 1, we do a line like this, which puts up 8, 10, 18. If we have another grade 1, we can put behind here for another 18, which is pretty good. But that is off of 1 card and 2 gauge. There is also the possibility of, if your hand up lines up really well for it, in the Buddy and Tsukikage build, of going for the Gojin Maru on turn 2. Because that on attack plus power has no grade restrictions whatsoever. So this will just immediately have that extra power on this turn and potentially be able to swing over triggers. which can matter quite a bit. But that's not going to be the typical line of what we're going for. So on to grade 3. We, of course, this is where we would, we want 2 damage here. Ideally, we are going to have spent some cards at this point. Like, we'll definitely have spent some cards at this point. Like, discard fodder or whatever. Let's say this, this is in there. Let's say we've, like, used the snake case. It's just a normal, let's say, let's put, because it's a pretty ideal one, if we don't need anything from our drop for our setup, would be Steel Ball, because that will let us go Counterblast 1, take both these cards back to our hand, just get a 15k shield back, then we Buddy Call out the Tsukikage. Tsukikage goes into, does it have to be different names? Different names from this card. So you can actually, like, go potentially for the double Tsukikage SD, call out 2 Byakuya SDs, go into double Gojumaru, something like that, or like, but like more likely we're going to be aiming for something along the lines of this, calling out a Byakuya from drop. We go into Gojumaru. Shoving these 2 in. If we are on the Gojin Marubuddy build, we ideally use Tsukikage on turn 2, and then that's the ninja that we get back with the Zanya effect. So we do this, and then ideally we can line up something along the lines of, if our opponent's on grade 2 at this stage, we don't actually need to line up a sorry, brain fart, to line up a Tsukikage SD into the Byakuya yet, because its effect is not actually going to be online. That might be something you do if you're a bit shaky on your defenses. But ideally we have a setup like this with a bunch of grade 1s, at least 1 Byakuya SD. We have a Tsukikage SD in here, though it's not actually useful at this stage, but it's there for us to make use of later. And this formation ends up looking like 15. Oh yeah, Byakuya SD actually doesn't matter here because our opponent's Vanguard is not a grade 3 yet, so this isn't actually going to be getting us any extra power. So that's going to swing in for 15. Whether you actually do the restand for Byakuya is actually pretty dependent on whether you have a futon. It's probably worth it if you have access to a futon, but otherwise the number here is so basic that it's probably not even worth going for. But we still swing in with this for basic 18. Then we 21. Oh, this would have restood on at the end of its attack. My bad. Get our drive checks. And then this will swing again for 28. Not super impressive numbers. The value of this deck is very much in its defensive utility, its ability to play a long game. On Persona Ride, by the time we get to Persona Ride, so with Persona Ride we have an extra 10k here. Matters a lot for our numbers. And at this stage, ideally we have a Tsukikage SD in the Buddy Soul over here. Oh, no, I did not mean to do that. ideally, we have that, which is going to be granting an extra plus 5k here. So these are both 25 base on the Persona ride. And like baseline, we really do want to set up Byakuya SDs in both of these backlines. So these will be plus 5k power. And at this point, you can see that, like, yeah, if we get to if we on our Persona ride turns, our numbers are pretty respectable and are going to be putting up a decent amount of pressure, especially considering the defensive value we have as a deck. So it's going to be this is going to swing for 30 solo, which is going to demand 2 cards. This is likewise going to swing for 30 solo, demanding 2 cards. We will discard ideally, and we counterblast here for this restand. Then Vanguard swings. We discard Futon ideally to restand the Byakuya. And we gauge and draw for that. Drive checks. Oh, cool. We hit a crit. And then we go. Then these second swings are really big. They are both going to be representing 48. These can represent 53 if we get Tsukikage SDs into the soul of these Byakuyas in the backline as well, which is very, very scary. You can also put one into the Shiden as well, so that the Zanya hits for a bit better numbers, hit for 36 on Persona, 26 without Persona. It's still not going to be hitting super great numbers, but it's better than we get there eventually. Like, we are very much playing the long game with this deck. So our numbers aren't going to be as good as other decks in the format, but they are enough to put up consistent pressure. But this is again why we're definitely on more fronts in this deck, because it is the front trigger value is quite valuable, considering like we just want continuous pressure. We just want to like gradually push our opponent higher and higher in damage until we can eventually just kill them. So yeah, that's Zanya. There's not so much to demonstrate on the gameplay side of things, because a lot of it is just like defensive value, knowing what to go for, recognizing what your opponent is capable of, and setting yourself up defensively for that. Using Hades Fall to really hose a few decks. It's useful against Jack too, because you can make it harder for them to get into Gold Ritter. You can blow up their base forms before they turn it into something else. Unlike Drum, who comes in with Soul, you can blow up Drum the Future as well. So like Hades Fall, despite having less value overall in this format, still does have some pretty strong value into like basically every deck in the format. So hey, it's not too bad. But that's going to be it for Zanya. And I will talk to you guys next time with the last frontrunner of the Buddyfight-only format, and the other deck outside of Zanya that has seen some rogue success in the main format. We will talk about Tsuku Ryuenji. With that said, this is Harry Surge, signing off.